Beautiful. Welcome to Dr. Sarah's Cafe. It has been a long time since I have greeted you all in this way on this channel, and I miss it. I miss this channel so much. So I'm back with a November energy update. I am still transitioning into being able to get back to a regular weekly cycle of videos, but my heart just really longed to be in this space again. So I thought, let's come back with a monthly flavor for the folks here at Dr. Sarah's Cafe. Usually I did a weekly flavor of the week, but just to make sure I got something out, I'm gonna do a monthly flavor. So for November, the flavor of the month is rewiring our systems, specifically rewiring our value systems and our belief systems. Okay, so the flavor for the month of November 2025, rewiring our systems, specifically rewiring our value systems and rewiring our belief systems. And why is that? First, I want to talk about the numerology of November. November generally is the 11th month of the year. So it always has a little flavor of that 11 energy. But in terms of numerological calculations, it's also an 11 universal month. Now, depending on the process you use to calculate the number, you might come out with a 2, a 20 that breaks down to a 2. But another formulation also leads us to an 11. So depending on what system of numerology you use, both the 2 and the 11 are at play this year. So I'm going to explain some overarching themes for both of those, and you can decide which one resonates the most for you. So let's start with the 2 energy for those who use the numerological formula that reveals November as a universal 2 month. The number 2 is a very receptive, feminine, patient energy, right? It is the energy of incubation. It likes to be in relationship, right? 2 is very much the partnership card in tarot, whether it's the 2 of Wands, the 2 of Cups, the 2 of Swords, and the 2 of Pentacles, right? They're about making decisions, about balance, give and take, equilibrium. And so that energy is very much here. And even when we think about the number 11 in tarot, which is the justice card, that is both about decisions and choices and commitments, but also it's about partnerships, whether they are legal partnerships, contracts, marriages, or just, again, the karmic balance, the cosmic balance, the energetic balance that we have in relationship to ourselves and other people, things, entities in the world, right? So those themes could be very important to reflect on or pay attention to. Now, with the number 11, 11 is one of the master numbers in numerology, and usually it doesn't break down into another number. So 11 is known as very spiritual, right? So it's considered the higher octave or the more spiritual expression of the number 2 in some instances. And so one of my favorite numerology books written by, what's her name? Shirley Blackwell Lawrence. The book is just over there off to my side. She describes it as the number 11 as the psychic master. And so the 11 has a lot to do with spiritual connection, right? And so we think about if we were to see 11 as the higher octave or the higher expression of the number 2, it's about that partnership, that give and take, that giving and receiving, but on a more spiritual plane, right? So being able to give and receive messages and communication and to be in closer union and closer partnership with the divine, with spirit, right? And with spiritual truths and knowledge and wisdom. And I also pulled a card. I don't have it like at my table today, but it's from Michelle Buchanan's Numerology Oracle deck. And so Michelle Buchanan really focuses on the individuality of the number 11. So the number 11, even though 1 and 1 equals 2, that 1 is still very much present. And so 1 is the number of the individual, the leader. And so I want to read a quote from Michelle Buchanan's Numerology guidebook as it pertains to the number 11 and some themes, how we might approach the November, which I'll elaborate on after I read this quote. So she says, 11, individuality. Embrace your individuality and be your true, authentic self, rather than follow the crowd. You're being guided to break away from the pack and take the road less traveled. At this time, you must have the courage to speak your truth and march to the beat of your own drum. despite the opinions of those around you. Now, what's really interesting is that before November, we had October. October, even though it's a 10, 1 and 0 breaks down to 1. And universally speaking, October was also a 1 month. And the number 1, as I've been saying, is all about the individual. It's all about the people who are the trailblazers, the people who aren't afraid to go first and to go it alone if necessary. And so to have that energy repeated again just 1 month later, right? So October, November, back-to-back months where we have this individuality, this creative leadership, avant-garde, or this authentic truth, personal expression energy at play is leading us into 2026, which is a universal 1 year. Okay, so this time, October, November, and even into December are very important months for preparing us, warming us up to that energy of 2026, which is a universal 1 year. And so for the collective, for the earth as a whole, we will be considering and experiencing that energy of trailblazing, leadership, individuality, creativity, right? And part of the dream work that I've been doing and studying more closely lately talks about how individuality is required for creativity, right? To be creative requires that courage to do something original, to follow that instinct, to follow that inspiration, even if it's not aligned with a template or not aligned with a prescribed recipe or formula, right? So if you think about cooking in a very individual, creative way, that means diverting from the standard recipe and adding your own garnish, your own flourish, your own little spice and dash of this or pinch of that, right? Or adding a special ingredient that's all your own. And so to be creative asks us to be individual in terms of our expression, right? I'm not saying individual as in don't have community. I just mean being able to express your inner world and express the truth of your soul and your heart out into the world. Okay, so that's the numerology of November. And when we think about our value systems and our belief systems, that also requires authentic truth, especially when we think about our belief systems. And so the part that's asking us to rewire our belief systems and our value systems are the retrogrades. So Uranus is already retrograde, but in November 7th, I believe, is going to retrograde back into the sign of Taurus. So it's going to retrograde out of Gemini, where it just dipped its toe for a few months, and it's going to go back into Taurus for the last time for several decades, right? So most of us will not be alive the next time Uranus is in Taurus again. So it's going back into Taurus to wrap up, to close out, to really, really make sure we've uprooted any lingering, limiting beliefs around our value systems. Taurus governs the things that we value, right? It could be material possessions that we value, things that have monetary or financial value, but it can also just be worth, our sense of worth, what is worth our time, what is worth our energy, what is worth our attention, what's worth our effort. And also how we value ourselves and how, we see when we value ourselves, we negotiate for a higher salary, negotiate for a higher rate of pay, right? And so Uranus going back into that part of the chart, Uranus ruling things like electricity, right? Uranus rules like electronics and wiring and that, lightning and things like that. And so it's going back and rewiring. So retrograde is about redoing things, rethinking something, remaking, revising, revisiting. And so Uranus retrograding into the house that governs our value system is going to be asking us to rewire something there so that it works more optimally, so that it functions in a more support to our soul's evolution and growth, right? Then the other thing that's asking us to rewire our belief systems is Mercury. So Mercury deals with the mind, our thoughts, and it has a very electric quality to it as well. And so it's also like a rewiring, thinking about the neurons in our brain, like the electric impulses and signals that go between neurons. And so even though Mercury isn't officially the planet of electricity, because Mercury rules the mind and the head and the thoughts, I also see it as being electrical in that sense, in terms of the neurons that are firing all the time. So Mercury will be retrograding starting in the sign of Sagittarius, and then moving back into the sign of Scorpio, and then going forward again into Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is the sign of our philosophy, our belief system, other things as well. But for the purposes of the flavor that I'm feeling for this month of November, retrograding from at the beginning of Sagittarius and going backwards into Scorpio, it's really going to be saying, okay, what do you really believe, right? And how can we borrow from our emotional truth? How can, even Scorpio being the sign of transformation and change in our deep psychology, right? And so it's interesting that it's going from that deep inner psychological realm and peeking out into like, okay, now what's my conscious philosophy? What are my conscious beliefs? What are the stories and the narratives that I tell about myself and the world and my people and my history, right? And so retrograding and saying, let's rewire some of those things, because maybe wires have been crossed, maybe the wiring has been shoddy or flawed or like eaten away by like squirrels or raccoons. And so we need to say, how can we rewire, install new wiring so that our inner psychology and our conscious belief system really, really serves us towards our greater destiny, and individually as well as collectively, okay? And then I also wanted to pull some cards for this month. Let me know. So this is not, again, my full shebang of the weekly refills that I used to do, but I was like, I got to get back to the YouTube folks. I have been posting shorts. So for those of you who primarily watched my weekly refills, I have always posted shorts. They weren't like a main thing, but I've been posting shorts more recently. And so hello to my new subscribers. I think a lot of you have newly subscribed because of the shorts I've been posting. Those shorts are clips from an Instagram live that I do every Friday called Full Cup Friday. So if you're following me on Instagram, you may want to check that out. Or if you're not following me on Instagram, you can follow me at Colorism Healing on Instagram. I'm using what's this deck called? The Lineages of Change tarot deck, which I think is just absolutely beautiful and stunning. So I'm going to shuffle for a little bit without talking because I don't have a microphone and it's going to mess up the audio. All right. I ask for clear, concise messages of love, support, and truth for those who are watching as it pertains to this energy for the month of November 2025 and beyond. What do we need to know about this month of November? What's a loving, supportive message for those watching as we advance into this fresh new month of November 2025? So I also want to invite you to my first Soul Cafe live Zoom gathering on November 8th. So if you're watching this in time, there's still time to register for the low cost of just your email address. You can join a Soul Cafe gathering on Zoom where we talk about the spiritual paths that we are all taking and exploring and discovering. It's really geared towards people who are curious about various metaphysical and esoteric and spiritual questions and paths and practices and tools and resources, but maybe you don't have a lot of people around you in your immediate community to talk with about those things or to geek out about those things. And maybe you just have felt unseen in your spiritual evolution. So I'll be sharing my story as well as, making space and holding space for good vibes all around. So the registration link will be in the description box below, and I hope to see you there on November 8th. Okay. You will not believe the card that just fell out. It is the number 11 and justice. You see that? The number 11 and justice. I mean, so this whole video has been an explanation of this card, basically. But seriously, all jokes aside, I love the synchronicity of that. But also the artwork is super cool. I love collage artwork. This deck has because this is the bottom of the deck card. So two very different types of artwork, you see? And as I'm mentioning the artwork, I'm being reminded of that theme of creativity requiring individuality, requiring the courage to be one of a kind, to be true to your authentic expression, even if it doesn't fit a pattern, even if it doesn't stick to the old recipe and the old frameworks, right? And so the courage to be your true self, to stand out, to do something different, to put your own unique spin on something. I feel I'm being called to reflect on the artwork in this deck because it does that. It is an actual representation of visual artwork that is unique and different all around, right? And so every card is slightly different. The artwork, the artists are individuals, right? They don't say, oh, well, I want my card to look like the other artist's card. And this deck was created by a team of like at least 10, maybe a dozen different artists, right? They all came together to create the artwork on this card. So that energy of 11, allowing the divine inspiration. So if you think about the 11 as spiritual energy and maybe even psychic energy, allowing that spiritual divine energy force to be expressed through you, right? And I say spiritual divine, and it's as simple as your own spirit, your own soul's expression, but also a larger God, universal energy as well for some of us, right? But speaking to the more traditional meaning of the Justice Tarot card, aside from the numerology of it, it is again that balance, that harmony, that equilibrium, that sense of partnership and aligned partnership and karmic equilibrium. And so I love that this card came out because it's confirming for me the fact that it's both the number 2 and the number 11, right? And I'm not a like official professional numerologist. I just study a lot of it. And so some numerologists might really argue for one calculation over the other, but the numbers are the same, right? And both versions of the numerology can give us insight and guidance. And I say that because there was a year, I had a personal year that originally was calculated as the number 2, but as I started to experience the year, my consultant and I discovered that I was probably in an 11 year instead of a 2 year, right? Which was 2024 for me. And so I think it serves us well to consider both calculations, to consider both versions of the numerology for November, whether it's the 2 and you're primarily focused on balanced partnerships, equilibrium, making wise choices, clear decisions based on truth, or you're more into the 11 side of November. And I think it could ebb and flow from day to day, right? So like Sunday, yesterday was 11/2 or 2/11, depending on what part of the world you live on. It was November 2nd, right? So the 2 and the 11 were in play. 11/11 is going to be a big portal that's coming up for a lot of people. It has already opened, right? But thinking about how the number 11 and the number 2 are going to be playing out for, in various ways for different people, depending on your own personal numerology. So I'll say this as well, is that in addition to the universal month numbers, each of us has a personal month number. So November is a personal month 5 for me. October, even though it was a universal month 1, it was a personal month 4 for me, right? And so I interact with the energy of the month differently than people who were in a personal month 2 or a personal month 7, right? And so let me know if we should talk more about personal numerology versus the universal numbers. But I think this Justice card is very clear. It's a very clear confirmation that there's that duality of the contracts and the partnerships and what's fair, what's balanced, what's in equilibrium, what's the right give and take in a situation, but also the 11 being the choice and the commitment to honor your own truth as an individual, to honor a larger truth that can be expressed through you and your individuality and your creativity, okay? So that was my relatively quick, it's 18 minutes, spiel. The overall flavor for November, again, is rewiring our systems, specifically rewiring our value systems and our belief systems. And depending on where that falls in your specific birth chart, you can get more insights and more information from there. But I hope that this was a helpful overview for everyone. And for my day ones, the people who have been around for a while, thank you for clicking on this video again after a long hiatus. And I really think you might enjoy the shorts that I've posted in the past several weeks if you haven't seen them already. To my new subscribers, welcome. This is just a taste of the kinds of content that I love to post, that I enjoy posting, and hope to be able to get back into a regular routine. And for those of you who were here pre-hiatus, I am still revising the book. Hopefully this is the last month of revisions. I've been, working with my editor, getting their feedback, and going back to the pages from time to time. But that book will come out next year, and I'll be telling you all about it. But for now, I am going to show up here however I can, and I just appreciate your presence and your engagement in this channel, no matter what that looks like. All right, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Much love.